welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling, well, a pretty provocative argument.
Yeah, it's from an article called Artists Are a Privileged Class.
Right. And the author says up front, look, this isn't meant to be perfectly balanced. It's a strong take.
Definitely a sharp perspective. It really challenges some common ideas about art and artists.
So our goal here isn't to agree or disagree necessarily.
Exactly. We're just going to unpack the claims, look at what the author says about copyright, the art market.
And AI, that's a big one too.
For sure. We're kind of stress testing these ideas, seeing what the argument actually is.
It does make you think, though. When you listen to music or see art online, do you ever stop and think about the economics behind it?
Or that image of the starving artist. Is that still the reality for most people creating stuff today?
Good question. Let's really get into it.
Okay, so the article kicks off with a pretty bold statement about copyright law.
Yeah. What's the take?
It calls it the ultimate artist welfare program.
Wow, okay. Welfare. What do they mean by that?
Well, the argument is that copyright gives artists this unique monopoly backed by the government.
Monopoly on their own work.
Yeah, and they argue it's a level of protection most other jobs just don't get.
They give examples, right? Like royalties.
Exactly. Think about a hit song or a famous painting or even a screenplay.
Right.
It can keep making money for the artist or their family for decades after it was made.
Okay, I see the point. Compared to, say, a plumber fixing a leak.
Or someone working retail. You do the work, you get paid for that time, and that's kind of it. There's no decades-long claim on that specific job you did.
So the article sees that long copyright term as a kind of special privilege.
And it goes further. It suggests that artists and, industry groups actively push to make those copyright terms even longer.
Okay. Why would they say that's a problem?
Well, the argument presented is that it's not just about encouraging new art. It's also about holding on to the value of existing work.
And maybe slowing down things entering the public domain.
That's the idea. That pool of older works everyone can freely use and build on. The longer the copyright, the longer it takes for stuff to get there.
Interesting. And this ties into AI somehow.
Yeah, the article brings up what it calls selective outrage.
Selective outrage. How so?
The point it makes is this. Many artists are, understandably, very upset about AI training on publicly available art, sometimes seeing it as theft.
Okay.
But the article argues artists themselves have always built on what came before, drawing from history, reinterpreting traditions.
So it's questioning where you draw the line between influence and appropriation.
Kind of. It's definitely poking at that tension. How is AI using past work different from how human artists have always used past work? It's a complex question.
Yeah, definitely tricky. Okay, so after copyright, where does the article go?
It shifts to the art market itself, calls it the bourgeois art market.
Bourgeois. Okay, so elitist.
That seems to be the implication. The critique is that galleries, big online platforms, auction houses, they often value things like the artist's name, their connections, the hype. Sometimes the article implies more than the actual skill or like the social value of the piece.
Is that where the banana comes in?
Yes. The duct-taped banana example is used precisely for that.
Sold for, what, $120,000 or something?
Something like that, yeah. It's presented as a prime example of, potentially absurd valuation in the art world.
Makes you wonder what people are actually buying, right? The art or the story around it?
That's exactly the question the article seems to be raising, and it connects this to newer platforms, too.
Like Patreon. Etsy.
Yeah, Spotify, too. The article calls this Patronage 2.0.
Patronage 2.0, meaning?
Meaning it's a new way artists get support, but maybe the driver is different. It might be more about direct fan enthusiasm.
Than, say, a critic's review or traditional ideas of craft.
Potentially, yeah. Monetization can come directly from connecting with an audience, building that following.
So, linking back to the starving artist idea.
Right. The article suggests that maybe that image isn't accurate anymore, or at least not universally. Creators today have lots of ways to potentially make money.
Digital prints, streaming, merch.
Exactly. And the author's perspective seems to be that maybe some artists are demanding more security for less perceived hardship than artists faced in the past. It's a challenging point.
It definitely pushes back against the romantic notion.
Okay, and then AI.
Yes, AI. The article calls it a potential great leveler.
A leveler. How?
The argument is that AI tools make creating high-quality images or music or text much more accessible.
So you don't necessarily need years of traditional training or expensive gear.
Maybe not to the same extent. The idea is that someone with the tech could produce, quote, gallery-worthy images quickly.
Which could bypass the traditional gatekeepers, galleries, agents, etc.
That's the suggestion. It potentially democratizes the creation part.
But artists are pushing back against AI, right?
Many are, yes. Yeah. And the article interprets this resistance in a specific way.
How so? It argues the opposition isn't just about, soulless machines taking over creativity.
What else would it be about, then?
According to this viewpoint, it's partly about economics, fear of losing the price floor.
The price floor. Meaning the high prices art can sometimes command.
Exactly. The idea that human-made art is exclusive, scarce, takes immense skill and time that justifies high prices.
And AI challenges that scarcity.
Potentially, yes. The article talks about scarcity as currency. If AI makes it easy to generate tons of creative work,
does that undermine the whole justification for those really high art fees?
That's the provocative question it raises. If creation becomes abundant, what happens to the value proposition based on rarity?
It forces you to think about what we're actually valuing. Is it the effort, the idea, the uniqueness?
All of the above. And how does AI change that calculation? It's a big shift.
Okay, so after AI, there's another point about passion.
Yeah. This section is pretty blunt. The heading is basically, passion isn't a paycheck grow-up.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the argument there?
It's basically saying, look, most people have hobbies they love, things they're passionate about.
Woodworking, knitting, playing music in a garage band.
Right. And they do it for enjoyment, not expecting it to pay the bills.
So the article contrasts that with art as a career.
Yes. It draws a line between that and what it calls the real-world grind of jobs like nursing, teaching, factory work jobs, often involving tough conditions.
And the argument is that artists sometimes expect their passion alone to guarantee an income.
That's the critique. It questions the expectation that choosing an artistic path automatically means society owes you a living from it.
Takes aim at the follow your passion mantra a bit.
Yeah, especially if following your passion comes with the expectation of it being financially rewarding by default.
What if the market just isn't there for someone's specific art?
The article suggests that maybe it just remains a passion, a hobby, not necessarily a viable career.
And it mentions the whole support artists or culture dies idea.
It does. It questions whether that framing ignores history.
How so?
By pointing out that culture has often flourished when creators also had other jobs. They use Shakespeare as an example.
Shakespeare wasn't just a playwright.
Apparently, he had ties to glove making or dealing in grain, things like that. The point being, art existed alongside other work.
Interesting historical context.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads into the final argument about history and patronage.
Exactly. It argues that, historically speaking, being a full-time artist wasn't the norm for most. It was often something supported by wealth.
So like nobles or the church commissioning works.
Right. Masterpieces were often commissioned, and artists were, in a sense, dependent on patrons. It wasn't necessarily seen as an independent career path everyone could just choose.
Less of an open market, more about who you knew or who supported you.
That's the historical picture it paints, not quite the modern idea of just making art and hoping it sells to anyone.
And so the article argues just getting an arts degree
doesn't automatically mean society has to fund your lifestyle if your work doesn't find an audience or a buyer.
It puts the onus on the market then. If people don't want to buy it,
then maybe it doesn't sustain itself as a full-time job. That's the rather stark conclusion it draws. It suggests this isn't a failure of society, necessarily.
And AI fits into this how, in the end?
The final thought is that AI isn't some alien force changing everything. It's just speeding up market trends that were already there.
And the kicker is,
if art needs special legal protections, like long copyright terms, just to survive as a full-time career for many, then maybe its viability as a standalone profession was always a bit questionable.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to chew on.
Definitely.
So, just to wrap up the core argument of this article, artists are a privileged class.
It basically says, modern artists benefit from generous copyright, an often elitist market. They're resisting the democratizing potential of AI.
And there's this expectation that passion should equal a paycheck. That's the gist.
That's the core argument presented, yeah. Forceful, maybe uncomfortable.
And again, we have to stress, the author themselves call it unbalanced.
Right. It's designed to provoke thought, to challenge assumptions, not necessarily to be the final word.
So maybe the big question for you, the listener, is, if any parts of this argument ring true, what does that mean for the future?
Yeah, what are the implications for how we think about art, creativity, and supporting artists?
Especially with technology changing things so fast. How do we balance supporting creators with these evolving tools and markets?
It's complex. There are no easy answers.
Definitely gives you a lot to mull over next time you engage with art. Think about copyright or see the latest AI creations.